Evaluate your experience. One of the most effective ways to build integrity in the moment of choice is to learn from your interaction with conscience. This is a process, a becoming, something you can practice. In the following chapter, we'll give specific ideas about how you can evaluate what's happening in your life as part of the Quadrant 2 organizing process. 10. Learning from living. As long as you live, keep learning how to live. Seneca. Roger, in consulting with a large corporation several years ago, had the opportunity to work and become friends with a psychologist who was raised in New York. As we frequently presented to the same group on the same day, I often heard him tell the story of how he and his professional peers would work with rats in mazes. They put the rat at one end of the maze and a piece of food at the other end and watched the rat as he bumped around until he eventually found the food. The next time they put him in, he bumped a little less and got to the food a little faster. After a while, he got to where he would zip through the maze and have that tidbit in his teeth within a few seconds. Then they took the food away. For a little while, each time he was put in, the rat kept making a beeline for the end of the maze. But it wasn't too long before he figured out the food wasn't going to be there, and so he stopped going. That's the difference between rats and people, my friend would say. The rats stop. Although his comments were made in fun, the point this psychologist made was very real. We often get into ruts, on treadmills, caught up in patterns and habits that aren't useful. We keep doing the same things in our lives week in, week out, fighting the same alligators, struggling with the same weaknesses, repeating the same mistakes. We don't really learn from our lives. We don't stop to ask, what can I learn from this week that will keep next week from essentially being a repeat of the same? The value of any week is not limited to what we do in it. It's also in what we learn from it and become as a result of it. For this reason, no week's experience would be complete without some kind of evaluation that enables us to process it. Evaluation is the final step and the first step in a living and learning cycle that creates an upward spiral of growth. It takes us back to the beginning of the process again, but with greater capacity. As we learn from living, we're better prepared to review our mission and roles, set goals, create a framework for a new week, and act with greater integrity in the moment of choice. As we organize, act, evaluate, organize, act, and evaluate again, our weeks become repeating cycles of learning and growth. Be observant if you would have a pure heart, said one unknown writer, for something is born to you in consequence of every action. What I like about experience is that it's such an honest thing. You may have deceived yourself, but experience is not trying to deceive you. The universe rings true wherever you fairly test it. This living and learning cycle is in the spirit of Kaizen, the Japanese word for the spirit of continuous improvement. It's in direct contrast to the Western mentality of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's following Seneca's advice, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. It's applying Peter Senge's fifth discipline of effective learning organizations on a personal basis. Real learning gets to the heart of what it means to be human. Through learning, we recreate ourselves. Through learning, we become able to do something we never were able to do. Through learning, we extend our capacity to create, to be part of the generative process of life. There is within each of us a deep hunger for this type of learning. Recognition of the importance of the evaluation process is reflected in what's often called the growth cycle, or the evaluation cycle, variations of which are used in the total quality movement and other processes focused on improvement and growth. Through weekly evaluation on a personal basis, we increase self-awareness, educate our conscience, and build effective habits of the heart. How to evaluate your week. Evaluation can be done in a personal journal or on the back page of the weekly worksheet as you wrap up one week and prepare for the next. You may find it helpful to create a checklist of questions to carry with you in your organizer and go through them each week before you begin the Quadrant 2 organizing process for the following week. You probably won't want to use more than 5 or 6 questions. You may want to select some from the following list. Which goals did I achieve? What empowered me to accomplish these goals? What challenges did I encounter? How did I overcome them? Was accomplishing these goals the best use of my time? Did my focus on these goals blind me to unexpected opportunities for better use of my time? Did meeting these goals add to my personal integrity account? Which goals did I not achieve? What kept me from accomplishing these goals? As a result of the choices I made, did I use my time in better ways than I had planned? Did my choices make deposits or withdrawals from my personal integrity account? What unmet goals should I carry into the coming week? Did I take time for renewal, reflection, and recommitment? Did I take time to sharpen the saw on a daily basis? In what ways did the time spent in renewal impact other areas? In what ways was I able to create synergy between roles and goals? What principles did I apply or fail to apply during the week? What was the effect? How much of my time was spent in Quadrant 2, Quadrant 1, Quadrant 3, Quadrant 4? What can I learn from the week as a whole? As you go through your questions, it's important to use your compass, to be deeply honest and self-aware, to connect with conscience, to use independent will and creative imagination to consider possibilities and commit to positive change. The week as part of a greater whole. It's also helpful to see each week as it connects to every other week. You may want to do a monthly or quarterly evaluation and ask questions such as these. What patterns of success or failure do I see in setting and achieving goals? Am I setting goals that are realistic but challenging? What keeps getting in the way of accomplishing my goals? What patterns or processes can be improved? Am I creating unrealistic expectations? How can I modify them? Rebecca, at one point some years ago, I felt a deep need to have some personal renewal time. Roger arranged to be home with the children for a few days, and I went alone to an inn where I spent hours reading through my personal journals. It was a very enlightening experience. I was able to revisit many moments of living with an increased perspective that gave me deeper understanding. But the most helpful insight came as I was able to see repeating patterns in my life that it was impossible for me to see from day to day. In the overview, I found the personal direction I needed, and I came home refreshed and much more connected to what was really important in my life. I've found that regular personal evaluation and renewal time is a vital part of learning from living. It's a time to review my mission statement, to think about important relationships in my life, and to set context goals in each of my roles. And Roger and I have found that doing it as a couple provides the same sense of renewal in our marriage. When we take time to be together alone on a regular basis, to review our shared mission statement, to set goals as marriage partners and parents, it really improves the quality of our lives, our relationship, and our family. The repeated process of organizing, acting, and evaluating helps us see the consequences of our choices and actions more clearly. It's the 4 endowments in action. It empowers us to learn from living and to live what we learn. The power of the process. As you think back over these last 6 chapters, can you begin to see why we said that the real power of the process would only be apparent as you became deeply involved in the foundations of it? If you're like many people, your initial experience with the Quadrant 2 organizing process may well have been essentially a third-generation experience. But as you go back to the process now with deeper understanding, you'll find yourself beginning to have more of a fourth-generation experience. You'll be able to go through each step of the process each week with greater depth of meaning and more powerful results. Consider how deeply understanding and following these 6 steps can empower you to put first things first in your life. Connect to mission empowers you to access the deep, burning yes, created by the awareness of first things in your life, the yes that generates passion and energy and makes it possible for you to say no with confidence and peace to the less important. Review your roles enables you to reconnect with the avenues through which you can do first things in a balanced, synergistic way. Identify your goals empowers you to focus effectively on the most important thing you can do in each role each week to accomplish your mission. It enables you to set principle-based, organize the week, enables you to put the big rocks, your important quadrant 2 goals, in first and to schedule other things around them. Exercise integrity in the moment empowers you to pause in the space between stimulus and response and act with integrity to first things in any moment of choice in your life. Evaluate empowers you to turn your weeks into an upward spiral of learning and living. The shift is from doing more things in less time to doing first things in an effective, balanced, and synergistic way. It's a holistic, integrated, and aligned approach to living, loving, learning, and leaving a legacy. But as far as we've come, there's an even richer experience ahead. It has to do with the synergy of interdependence, with the full reality of our connectedness with others. As we move into the next section, we'll be looking at time and quality of life where we experience it most often and most profoundly. The synergy of interdependence. As we move into the interdependent reality, we'd like you to stop and think how powerfully your relationships with other people affect your time and the quality of your life. How much time do you spend in unnecessary quadrant 1 crises because of miscommunication, misunderstanding, or lack of clarity around roles and goals in interdependent effort? How much time do you spend in quadrant 3 scrambling to meet the real or perceived agendas of others that often turn out to be not really important at all? How much of your time in your family or organization is wasted in miscommunication, misunderstanding, politicking, backbiting, blaming, accusing, or confessing each other's sins? How much of the potential that could have significant impact on time and quality of life, the talent, creativity, and enthusiasm of others you live and work with, remains untapped? For most people, the large majority of waking time is spent communicating or interacting with other people, or dealing with the results of poor communication or interaction. Effective interdependence is core to the issue of time management, but the traditional literature essentially ignores it or deals with it in a transactional way. This transactional approach grows out of the mechanical, controlling, managing things paradigm. People are essentially seen as bionic units to whom we can delegate to get more done, or as interruptions to be handled efficiently so that we can get back to our schedule. But fourth-generation interdependence is not transactional, it's transformational. It literally changes those who are party to it. It takes into consideration the full reality of the uniqueness and capacity of each individual and the rich serendipitous potential of creating synergistic third alternatives that are far better than individuals could ever come up with on their own. Fourth-generation interdependence is the richness of relationships, the adventure of discovery, the spontaneity and deep fulfillment of putting people ahead of schedules, and the joy of creating together what did not exist before. It's the ultimate moving of the fulcrum, the exponential increase of creativity, capacity, and production that comes from combining the energy and talents of many in synergistic ways. In this section, we'll take an in-depth look at the interdependent nature of life and see how our character and competence affect our ability to work with people in every dimension. We'll talk about how to create synergy with others through Quadrant 2 activities, such as creating shared vision and empowering stewardship agreements. We'll show you how to create a common compass that will empower you to form complementary teams that leverage your strengths and make your weaknesses irrelevant. Finally, we'll deal with empowerment, the ultimate Quadrant 2 preparation prevention tool. You'll see how creating empowerment from the inside out can increase your capacity and influence everyone around you, families, friends, associates, toward higher performance and greater achievement. If your lifestyle is essentially independent, or for some other reason you prefer not to enter this level of complexity, feel free to move ahead to Section 4. But we encourage you to explore this vital area, which is virtually ignored by traditional time management. You'll be surprised to discover how powerfully the problems and the potential of interdependence affect your time and the quality of your life. 11. The interdependent reality. Interdependence is and ought to be as much the ideal of man as self-sufficiency. Man is a social being. Gandhi. As we move into the interdependent reality, we'd like to ask you to think about what you've decided are first things in your life. How many of these things involve relationships with other people? It's our experience that, almost without exception, everything people identify as really important has to do with others. Even those who list something such as health or economic security generally do so because they want to have the resources to enjoy life with their family and friends. Our greatest joy and our greatest pain comes in our relationships with others. The fact is that quality of life is, by nature, interdependent. Our roles are interdependent. We're husbands, wives, parents, friends, bosses, employees, co-workers, friends, associates, community members, citizens. Quality in almost every role involves a relationship with at least one other individual. Our accomplishments are interdependent. Although we look back in history and tend to say that one particular person invented or discovered a particular thing, the reality is that most great achievements were not made in a vacuum. The individual who receives the credit usually stands on the shoulders of many who went before, clearing the path, leading the way, finding the things that didn't work so that eventually someone could find the one thing that would work. Even the fulfillment of our fundamental needs and capacities is interdependent. To live is to have physical health and economic security. Where would we be without doctors, hospitals, penicillin, and health insurance? We get our paycheck because what we do in some way affects the lives of others. We spend our paycheck on things that represent the labors of others. To love is, by definition, interdependent. Love isn't love till you give it away. It involves relationships with others and belonging, and it's based on one of the major themes of all wisdom literature, reciprocity, or the golden rule. To learn is to grow, to feel ourselves expanding. How often does learning come as we read books written by others, attend seminars given by others, sit in classes taught by others? How many of our own ideas grow out of the ideas of others? To leave a legacy is also, by definition, interdependent. It's contributing to society, contributing in meaningful ways to the lives of others. The world we live in is the legacy of those who went before us. The choices we make in it create a legacy for those who will follow us. The fact is that we're better together than we are alone. Humility comes as we realize that no man is an island, that no one individual has all the talents, all the ideas, all the capacity to perform the functions of the whole. Vital to quality of life is the ability to work together, learn from each other, and help each other grow. The independent paradigm. Despite the obvious interdependent reality of quality of life, we tend to see success in terms of independent achievement. And the time management literature essentially reflects this independent achievement paradigm. In one way or another, most of the literature says time is life, but the skills and techniques have to do with management of things. People are seen primarily as resources through which we increase our leverage through delegation, or as interruptions to be handled efficiently so that we can stay on schedule. There's a place for independence. In the space between stimulus and response, independence is having the strength of character to transcend scripting, the social mirror, and other influences that would keep us from a principle-centered response to life. But as well as a place, there's a purpose for this independence. It's not an end in itself. True independence precedes and prepares us for effective interdependence. It's the personal trustworthiness that makes trust possible. There's also a role for independence when we're dealing with things, and here is where we find great value in the time management literature. It's filled with excellent high-leverage ideas and techniques for the management of things. But people aren't things. When we're dealing with people, we're dealing with living, breathing human beings who have their own space between stimulus and response. They also have human endowments and an incredible capacity to act within that space. And a good percentage of our time is spent interacting in this interdependent reality. Aside from personal integrity, our greatest problems and our greatest potential for impacting time and quality of life issues are in the interdependent arena. The cost of the independent paradigm. When we try to satisfy needs and fulfill capacities through an independent achievement, linear, chronos-only paradigm, life sometimes seems like an hour in a huge smorgasbord. There's only so much time, so we have to maximize our satisfaction, sample as much as we can. We rush through the line, grabbing as much variety as possible. We become gluttons of experiences and sensations. We rush to live. Maintaining a healthy lifestyle takes too much time and effort, so we eat what we want, do what we want, burn the candle at both ends, and depend on the medical profession to pick up the pieces. Economic security becomes maximizing the bottom line, regardless of meaning or means. We rush to love. We have hit-and-run relationships, often leaving broken bodies and broken lives strewn along the path. We want the benefits of marriage, but we don't make the emotional commitment to live a life of rich interdependence, of selfless service, of sensitivity, of continuous improvement of character to make it grow. We bring children into the world, but we're not committed to the tremendous time and effort it takes to teach and train, to love and listen. We sample a few of the fruits from the relationships closest to us, but there's no time to reach out to others and love on a broader basis. We rush to learn. There's no time for deep conversation, for interacting with others in meaningful ways. Learning is superficial. We're into skills, methods, and techniques without understanding the principles that empower us to act in a variety of situations. We rush to leave a token legacy. We send in a few dollars here, a few dollars there, and it gives us a fix of contribution for a moment or two, but it isn't lasting. There's no real commitment, no overriding sense of deep purpose and contribution in our lives. As many social scientists and commentators have pointed out, this fast-paced, independent paradigm has created a massive imbalance in our society. In order to get more golden eggs, we're killing the very goose that produces them. We're so busy consuming that we don't take care of our capacity to produce, and we see evidence of it all around us, in the national debt, healthcare problems, the world economy, the lack of willingness of Wall Street to invest in long-term development. Father of modern stress research, Hans Selye, compares the independent achievement focus to the development of a cancer whose most characteristic feature is that it cares only for itself. Hence, it feeds on the other parts of its own host until it kills the host, and thus commits biological suicide, since a cancer cell cannot live except within the body in which it started its reckless, egocentric development. To some extent, as a society, we're on a ladder that's leaning against the wrong wall. We're living with the illusion of independence, but the paradigm is not creating the quality of life results we desire. To change the results, we need to change the paradigm. The interdependent paradigm. As True North teaches us, the reality is that we're part of a vast, highly interrelated living ecology. Quality of life is interdependent. At the center is the personal dimension. Each of us is an individual. We have unique human endowments and some degree of character and competence in using those endowments to fulfill our fundamental needs and capacities. As individuals, we enter into relationships with other individuals. This is the interpersonal dimension. In our relationships, we work with others to accomplish tasks, represented by the managerial dimension. We align systems and coordinate work for collective purposes, which is the organizational dimension. All of these dimensions are in the context of and affect the society in which we live. Let's look at some of the implications of this interdependent reality. 1. All public behavior is ultimately private behavior. The problems we see in families, organizations, and societies are the result of individuals making choices in their space between stimulus and response. When those choices come out of reactivity, scripting, or urgency response, it impacts time and quality of life for families, organizations, and society as a whole. Look at a marriage, for example. If marriage partners haven't paid the price in their deep inner lives, things may begin wonderfully, but when the hard issues come up, child discipline, finances, in-laws, they won't have the character and competence to interact in synergistic, positive ways. They fall back on their scripting, which may be very different. And if they aren't principle-centered, this difference can lead to positioning and polarization, eventually even bitterness and alienation. On the other hand, if marriage partners are principle-centered, they tend to value differences and work together to understand their scripting and true north principles. They seek synergistic third alternative solutions to meet their challenges. They see each other's weaknesses as opportunities to help. They're less concerned about who is right than what is right. They see their family as the fundamental unit of society and realize that one of the most important ways they can contribute to society is to create a strong home and raise their children to be responsible members of society. They also support and help each other in other ways to contribute to society as a whole. The same thing is true in organizations. One of the reasons we have difficulty with total quality initiatives and empowerment programs is that many of the people who try to create these things in organizations haven't paid the price to work things out in their own deep inner lives. Often they've been scripted toward independence and competition through love given conditionally when they were a child, the normal distribution curve of academics, the win-lose paradigm of athletics, or a forced ranking system on the job. They may be very sincere in their effort, but they can't sustain action outside their deep paradigms. The late W. Edwards Deming, considered by many to be the leading voice of the total quality movement, said that the majority of the problems in organizations are with systems, not people. But people create systems. If people are scripted in competitive, scarcity mentality, independent, Chronos-only paradigms, and if they aren't aligned with true north, the results in organizations and society will reflect it. Total quality and empowerment take on dimensions of the flavor of the month instead of creating deep, sustained quality change, and people become cynical about the effort. Total quality begins with total personal quality. Organizational empowerment begins with individual empowerment. That's why work in our deep inner life and integrity are so important. Stephen, recently in a large group, a man said to me, "Stephen, how do we get principle-centered leadership into the Congress?" I said, "How do you treat your wife?" "What's that got to do with it?" he demanded. I said, "Ultimately, public policy is private morality writ large." He flushed at that and didn't say another word. Thinking I had offended him, I went up to him afterward to apologize. "I'm sorry if I offended you. I didn't mean to do that. But I really believe in the inside-out approach." "It's not that you offended me," he said, "but what you said hit home. All my life I've tended to blame other people out there for injustices, and I know I've taken out my frustrations on my loved ones. For you to put your finger on that problem hit me hard, but I needed to hear it. Ultimately, there's no such thing as organizational behavior. It's all behavior of the people in the organization." 2. Life is one indivisible whole. As we mentioned earlier, Gandhi once observed that a person cannot do right in one department of life whilst attempting to do wrong in another department. Life is one indivisible whole. An associate shared this story. "At one time, I worked for a large aerospace company. I was part of a key marketing team whose assignment was to prepare executive summary presentation materials to help sell multi-billion-dollar defense programs and products. One day, a new member of the team was hired and introduced. We could tell by the way management rolled out the red carpet that he was considered a prized recruit. He was very bright and came with 10 years of related experience in the industry. He was appointed team leader on the company's most important new business proposal. I was assigned to work with him and to occupy the open office space next to his. As work progressed on the project, I soon came to know this person very well. Because of our close proximity, I could overhear all of his telephone calls and conversations. These calls began to reveal a very sordid and disorganized private life. Aware that I was picking up signals, he would explain away the calls and then say, "But this won't affect my work." He repeated that line day after day. As the intense proposal effort peaked, the hours and pressure at work doubled. Now in the pressure cooker, the private life of this team leader had its ugly effects. Working on little sleep and peace, he became impossible to work with. Short-tempered, unreasonable, argumentative, imbalanced. It affected everyone. In spite of his considerable knowledge, he became an obstacle to the project and was fired only 6 months after he was brought on with such high expectations. We may think we're fooling others. We may even be fooling ourselves. But if we're duplicitous or dishonest in any role, it affects every role in our lives. 3. Trust grows out of trustworthiness. Trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's the foundational principle that holds all relationships, marriages, families, and organizations of every kind together. And trust grows out of trustworthiness. Stephen. At one time, my little boy saw me speaking harshly about someone. He instantly came up to me and said, "Do you love me, Dad?" He was so authentic, so tender, so vulnerable. He could see in my nature the possibility of not loving someone, and he immediately applied it in our relationship. He was questioning my trustworthiness. He wanted to know if it was safe for him to trust my love. I had a completely opposite experience myself one time when I was asked to teach as a visiting professor for a year in a university in Hawaii. When we arrived, we found that the housing situation was not what we expected, so I went in and complained to the university president about his housing director. I was critical and upset. I told him what the agreement and expectation had been, and how things weren't working out. He listened to me with respect, and then he said, "Stephen, I'm so sorry to hear about this, but the housing director is such a fine, competent person. Let's have him come over here and we'll solve it together." That was not what I'd expected to hear. I didn't want to get involved. I just wanted to complain and moan and have him fix it. I'll never forget the few minutes it took for the housing director to come over to the president's office and what was going through my mind and heart. What have I gotten myself into? I'm probably partly responsible for this mess. I'll bet my own communications weren't that clear. By the time he got there, my whole spirit was subdued. I was humbled. I was also a little chastened and embarrassed for my arrogance. As the housing director walked in, I said, "Hi, how are you? Nice to see you." I was very aware of my own duplicity, but oh, what respect I felt for that president who sustained his people, who spoke positively about them and wanted them involved in the process of resolving any negative issues. That man was principle-centered. I knew if someone were ever to complain about me in his presence, in any capacity, he would treat me with the same respect. This man was loyal to those who were absent. I never played fast and loose with anyone's reputation around him again. I knew what kind of person he was. Trust is something you can't fake or quick fix.